This is All India Radio Cuttack. Good evening, listeners. We now bring you an interview with former Secretary of Sahitya Academy, a poet, a critic, Professor K.Satchidanandan. Tarun Kanti Rout speaks to him to know more about his literary output.
Hello, listeners. We are really very proud, or we feel privileged to talk to one of the most prominent English writers and Malayalam writers, K.Satchidanandan, who has got immense contribution to the growth of literature of the world. And he is also recipient of Gangadhar Meher Award and International Award of Poets for Peace. Sir, you write both in your mother tongue Malayalam and English. How do you strike a balance between the two?
No, actually, there is a misunderstanding that I write in English. I don't write in English. I write only essays, articles, etc. in English, only prose. All that you see of my poetry in English are translations of my Malayalam poems. I translate myself. So, you will find me also in many Indian English.
Yes, sir. In anthologies, I find a lot of translation of yours, especially that poem on Gandhi.
Yeah, and I have argued with them that saying that I am a Malayalam poet, but all the editors say you are bilingual.
But sir, I think you are a bilingual because the person who writes criticism or essays in English is definitely a man of great eminence. So how do you strike a balance? How do you write in English and also write creatively for Malayali readership?
Malayalam is my mother tongue, and English is the language in which I communicate with people who are outside Kerala. And also, I was a professor of English more than 25 years. And as soon as I complete a poem, if it is translatable, I also translate it into English. Perhaps other people can also do that, but then being the poet himself, I know how the poem was imagined and how it was conceived and how it was written. And so that helps me translate perhaps better than other poets.
Mr. Satchidanandan, you are a poet, you are a writer, you are a translator, you are a playwright, you are a critic, you are a columnist. How do you manage so many different jobs at the same time?
That's a question that I have been asked many times by many people.
Also, you are a literary connoisseur. Yes.
Well, I do not have an answer for that, only that I try to find as much time as possible for all these creative things. I also go around and give lectures, so almost every week I have 2 or 3 programs, either readings or talks. So I try to stretch my day, and I have less sleep and more waking hours so that I can work. Because there is no other way to cope with all the kinds of duties I have, obligations I have. So now it has become a little more because I am also the president of the Kerala Sahitya Academy. So I have also the duties of the president of the academy. There are many meetings to attend, etc. And then, of course, I have one column of poetry translation in Malayalam. Earlier, I ran a column in the Frontline magazine in English.
Yeah, I know,
Now
sir.
they want me to revive. I may go back to that column also. And then, of course, whenever I have a poem, I forget everything else and just write that. When I don't have a poem of my own, but to keep up my poetry, I also keep translating poetry. So I have about 2,500 pages of translations of poetry, about more than 1,000 pages of poetry also.
Mr. Satchidanandan, you are the former editor of Indian literature. You are the secretary of Kendra Sahitya Academy. What is your view on Indian writing in English and Indians writing in Indian languages? And which one has an advantage over the other?
I think each of the Indian languages has its own special genius. No language is inferior or superior. The so-called tribal languages are coming up very much now because there is a lot of very good poetry being written in the Northeast, in Arunachal or Meghalaya and Nagaland and such places. Some of the finest poets of our time in English come from the Northeast. And of course, there are great poets living in also Bombay and Delhi and other similar centers of English when it comes to English. But in the languages also, I think there's a lot of new writing happening. especially writing by women, writing by Dalit poets, and also writing by new poets who are trying to experiment with form. So something very radical is happening in all the languages. People who were not writing earlier are coming up. Even in Malayalam, there are many tribal people now writing in their own languages. They also give a Malayalam version so that other people can understand. So such things are happening. Languages within the languages are also waking up, and there is a lot of such new writing coming up.
And recently, Gitanjali Sri's fiction, The Tomb of Sand, got Booker Prize. And that is written in Indian language.
Yes, I'm very happy about that because it is a recognition not only for the writer and the book, but for Indian languages in general and Indian language literature in general. So it is a great symbol. Like all of you, I am also extremely happy about it. I am now reading the translation.
Mr. Satchidanandan, your essays on Indian literature are well regarded. They are the reflections of the strategy of writing or the way writings are being done, and like your positions and the propositions. So how do you view the literary scenario in the country vis-a-vis world literature?
No, I think it is, and we are doing a great job. Our Indians are writing very well. Problem is that a lot of good writing in the languages does not get translated into English because in order to be noticed by people in India other than your own people and also by other people across the world, first you need to be translated into English, and maybe from there it travels into, French or German or Russian or whatever, like my own poetry has done. Because my poems are English translations, that was how I really got noticed by other people. And so I have translations in Arabic and Irish and French and German and Italian and of course quite a few Indian languages. I think it happened mainly because there were English translations. Some translated directly into some of the languages, but some translations were made from my own English versions. So translation becomes very important in getting noticed across the world or even across your own country because India is such a multilingual country. So to be noticed, to be read by people from languages other than your own, you need to be translated first into English or at least into Hindi, because there are at least some people who know Hindi outside India, and inside India, almost in every region, there are people who know Hindi. So getting translated into Hindi and English becomes very important in that.
Sir, did you translate your own poem, Gandhian poetry?
Yes, that was also my own translation.
One day a lean poem.
Poems on Gandhi, and that was the beginning of my poems on Gandhi. I did not know it was a beginning.
It's such a beautiful poem. One day a lean poem reached Gandhi's ashram to have a glimpse of the man. Gandhi spinning away his thread towards Ram, took no notice of the poem waiting at his door, ashamed at not being a bhajan. The poem now cleared his throat, and Gandhi glanced at him sideways through those glasses and that had seen hell. Have you ever spun thread? He asked. Ever pulled a scavenger's cart? Ever stood in the smoke of an early morning kitchen? Have you ever starved? The poem said, I was born in the woods, in a hunter's mouth. A fisherman brought me up in a cottage. Yet I knew no work, I only sang. First I sang in the chorus, then I was plump and handsome. But am on the streets now, half-starved. Sir, this is poetics, a poem on poetry. I think like Ted Hughes'
Yes.
Thought Fox, It's such a beautiful poem. How could you translate so beautifully?
Because I think I handle both Malayalam and English with equally ease because of my training was in English. I did my MA in English, and I was also teaching the language for quite a few, as I said, for a quarter century. So that helps me in translating. And also I know the spirit of the poem because I myself wrote it. That is how I have quite a few translations, about 700 pages of translations of my own poetry done by myself. They have been published by Poetry Wala in Bombay with the title The Missing Rib. It has more than 600 pages. And after that, 2 more books have come out. So...
That's very nice. Sir, you are the recipient of the prestigious Gangadhar Meher Award in 2002, if I remember. And probably you might have a smattering of Odia language. And what is your impressions of Odia language?
Of course, it is one of the major languages in the country. even though I know that in the beginning it was not even recognized as a language. Many Bengalis considered it was another form of Bengali. It was absolutely wrong. Oriya is an independent language and it has its own great literary tradition. Earlier also it has produced great poets, Bhakti poets like Salabega and all that. And of course, there are poets like Joydev. More recently, you have poets like Gangadhar Mehar. And after that, current times, you have poets like Siddhakant Mahapatra and Ramakant Rath and quite a few. I know most of the poets in Oriya. So I think it is a great poetic tradition. And also now, Oriya fiction is also coming up. You have Pradibha Roy. And there are quite a few young people who are writing very well now, both poetry and fiction. I consider it one of the most important literary languages of India. I have always thought so. I know it by reading translations from Oriya and also interacting with a lot of Oriya writers.
Have you gone through Gopinath Mohanty's Paraja?
Indeed. Paraja, I first read in English. I have also given a talk on Gopinath Mohanty, one of the memorial talks on Mohanty. I have a whole essay on Gopinath Mohanty.
Mr. Satchidanandan, you are also a recipient of United Arab Emirates International Award for Poets of Peace. How do you feel that you have won an award for peace? What is your contribution towards the peace? Of course, the Gandhian poetry is reminiscent of your...
in fact, all my poems are, even though not directly but indirectly, about the need for peace. Because I have stood against war of any kind and war in any name, in the name of religion or in the name of the nation, whatever. I am against the very idea of war. And I have a poem on Hiroshima. I have a poem on the explosion, the first nuclear experiment in India, in Pokhran. So wherever there are signs of war or preparations for war, I have opposed it through my poetry. Of course, I have done it in other ways also. But my poetry has always stood against war and spoken about the need for peace, for love, for religious harmony, so that our country may not be divided once again. So probably I think that was the consideration they had when they offered me this Poetry for Peace prize.
Therefore, probably in the words of Gandhi, you have given advice to poets. That's better, Gandhi said with a sly smile. But you must give up this habit of speaking in Sanskrit at times. Go to the fields, listen to the peasant's speech. The poem turned into a grain and lay waiting in the fields for the tiller to come and upturn the virgin soil moist with new rain. What a beautiful poem.
Thank you so much. Because it does. Because I don't mean Sanskrit as a language. I admire Sanskrit. I have read a lot of Sanskrit. What I meant was that poets should write in a simpler language, closer to the people. Only then they will be able to. That's what Gandhi is saying. I am not saying that. Gandhi is saying that poetry should write. Poetry should be closer.
But it is Mr. Satchidanandan who is saying, because I remember Wordsworth released English poetry from courtly love. I mean, the way John Donne, Mr. Cowley and Andrew Marvell, they were writing metaphysical poets. And he naturalized the supernatural. He brought natural poetry into English realm. Thank you, Mr. Satchidanandan from Thrissur. You really carried and blew me over. And the entire interview was a really spellbinding session. And I thoroughly enjoyed your words and views on English literature, on Indian languages, writings, and the criticism that is being written today, and the literary scenario of the world. And All India Radio gives special thanks to you. Thank you very much.
That was an interview with Professor K.Satchidanandan on his achievement in the field of literature. It's come to you from the studio of All India Radio Cuttack. Now stand by for our next announcement in Odia, which follows in a few seconds.